immediately after Princess Astrid of Sweden died in a car crash. Her husband, King Leopold of Belgium, made a gut-wrenching request. Sweet-faced and with a golden heart to match, there's a reason the beautiful Astrid of Sweden was the beloved queen of the Belgians, until her utterly tragic end took the royal far too soon. From her fairy tale beginning to the nightmare of her final hours, Astrid was like a long-lost no-princess from a storybook. To say Astrid was born with a silver spoon in her mouth would be a huge understatement. It was more like a solid gold ladle. Born on November 17, 1905, this fierce Scorpio was the youngest daughter of Prince Karl and Princess Ingeborg of Sweden. As the beautiful baby of the family, the royals often doted on Princess Astrid. Sadly, this only makes her end all the more heartbreaking. There hadn't been any Swedish princess in the royal line for a good long while, and the public greeted the three royal girls with enormous enthusiasm. In fact, when Astrid's older sister, Margareta, had her confirmation in 1916, it caused a total media frenzy, but Princess Astrid would soon outdo even her popular sibling. There's a side to the Swedish royal family that people don't know. Astrid's mother, Ingeborg, was one of the most capable members of the Swedish nobility, but she had a softer side when it came to her children. Astrid's relatives were loving, close-knit, brood, and around Sweden people called them the happy family. That doesn't mean everything was perfect, though. Today, Princess Astrid is beloved in Sweden, but she wasn't always as revered in her own family. She might have been the baby, but she wasn't her mother's favorite. After all, Ingeborg was loud and confident, while Astrid had always been sweet and quiet. Instead, Ingeborg saved her best affections for Astrid's older sister, Martha, who was outgoing and brassy. People think of the royals as living extravagantly, but the truth was much more complicated. Astrid's parents wanted their children to grow up simply, and even installed a real stove in their play cottage so that they could learn to cook actual food. For them, hard labor was far better than royal manners. Well, they'd very much need this work ethic. In 1922, tragedy struck the happy Swedish royal family when the stock market crash hit and destroyed nearly all of their investments. Still a teenager, the young Princess Astrid watched in horror as her mother went almost entirely bankrupt and had to sell off their property. And another twist of fate was around the corner. Just after her 20th birthday, Astrid's parents started looking around at the eligible bachelors across Europe. After all, they needed to get her a royal husband now that their stocks were down. It was a date with destiny. For almost a moment, Astrid met Prince Leopold of Belgium. The pair were utterly smitten with each other, and Astrid embarked on a complete fairy tale at first. Astrid was one of the most ravishing princesses of her day, so it was no wonder that Leopold knew he had to have her the moment he saw her. Yet they hid a secret behind the bedroom doors. Instead of marrying immediately, servants kept seeing a butler coming and going from Astrid's residence. Yes, this was actually Leopold in disguise, meeting his lover in semi-secret. Certainly, Leopold were infamously, some might even say uncomfortably, into PDA. Wherever they went, people saw them holding hands and canoodling with each other. They even maintained obvious physical contact during official engagements, which was a pretty big deal for royals in the 1920s. A down-to-earth princess, if there ever was one of Astrid's favorite hobbies was cooking. Actually, this was how she won her way into Leopold's heart. The princess was always making new dishes for her loved ones, and Leopold once admitted he was bowled over by her endive salad. In the fall of 1926, Astrid and Leopold officially announced their engagement, inviting journalists to a press conference where Leopold's parents, King Albert I and Queen Elizabeth, couldn't help boasting. "It is a marriage of love. Tell it to our people." Very few royals got love matches in those days, and Leopold and Astrid were supposed to be the lucky ones. When Astrid and Leopold had their royal church wedding on November 10, 1926, it was a fairy tale for the ages. The festivities in Brussels opened with the 21-gun salute, but the crowds were so loud that the shots were barely audible. It was no wonder Astrid looked magnificent in a cream-wrapped dress with a veil made of Belgian lace. Don't let her angelic looks fool you. Behind Astrid's sweet face was a steel will no man could ever bend. Despite the warnings of her stuffy court officials, Astrid was determined to live her life, and often snuck out to do things the normal way. One day, when her husband was in a procession, she even went so far as to watch him from the middle of the common crowd. Leopold and Astrid had 3 children together, Josephine, Charlotte, Baudouin, and Albert. Just like her own parents, Astrid strove to raise them without any royal heirs. The family often lived in a small villa on the palace grounds, and Astrid still loved cooking for them personally, rather than leaving it to the help. Except it wasn't long before Astrid's fury side came out again. Astrid was beloved by pretty much all of her subjects, in both Sweden and Belgium. They called her tender, understanding, and profoundly human. But she also made some formidable enemies in the palace. The most conservative and haughty members of the court tended to dislike her democratic attitude, but Astrid knew the perfect way to deal with them. Astrid loved taking her children on walks through Brussels' busy Avenue Louis, which absolutely infuriated one of her court aides for breaking protocol. When the man berated her, she gave the perfect reply. She might have been simple, but she was no dummy. In response, she said innocently, "But I am just another mother, am I not?" On February 17, 1934, everything changed for Princess Astrid. On this day, her beloved father-in-law, King Albert II of Belgium, perished suddenly in a mountaineering accident. Without warning, the grieving Princess Astrid was now the queen consort of the Belgians, though, as we'll see, she had the precious little time to enjoy her title. After the tragic passing of her father-in-law, Astrid made a heartbreaking decision. She was pregnant at the time of King Albert's accident, and when she gave birth to a healthy baby boy soon after, she named the little one Albert, in memory of the grandfather who the young heir would never get to meet. Perhaps in an effort to up their chances of that sweet PDA, Astrid and Leopold often went undercover when they traveled. For their honeymoon, they may have even taken it one step further and misreported their destination, saying they were headed to Egypt and Switzerland, but really heading to France. Sadly, this habit would soon come back to haunt them. Astrid really should have had a happily ever after. Not only was Leopold deeply in love with her, but he was also willing to risk everything for that love. When she went into labor with their second child while Leopold was away, her Prince Charming dropped all of his important meetings to get back home for the birth, not something many men did back then. Astrid was one tall drink of Swedish spring water, though we don't know her exact height in feet and inches. Her mother-in-law, Queen Elizabeth, who was often short herself, used to remark approvingly that Astrid was the perfect height to reach her son, Leopold's eyes. Leopold and Astrid's marriage was an all-holding hands in secret honeymoon. Right before their wedding, Leopold asked Astrid to make a crucial decision. He wanted her to convert from her native Lutheran faith to Catholicism, the official religion of Belgium. This was a big deal back then, but Astrid's response wasn't what you'd expect. Never one to rush into things, Astrid took her time deciding if she would convert. Royal pressure be darned. She even consulted a Catholic priest about her faith, and only converted literal years after their wedding. Yet when she did it with her whole heart. As she told a childhood friend about her choice, she said, "My soul has found peace." Things might have been very different for Astrid if she hadn't married Leopold. One of the other men her parents considered for her hand was the then Prince of Wales, Edward VIII of the United Kingdom. Considering that Edward eventually abdicated his throne in order to marry the divorcee, Wallis Simpson, it was probably a good thing that ship had sailed. 1935 was the year that Queen Astrid of Belgium proved her mettle. The country was in the throes of an economic crisis, and Astrid immediately took the helm to console her people. Not only did she visit the poor, but she also penned the Queen's Appeal, an open letter that helped raise supplies for those in need. Sadly, however, 1935 was also the year Astrid hit her worst tragedy. Like any good Swede worth her salt, Astrid was an outdoor girl. Among her favorite sports were skiing, as well as horseback riding, swimming, and even golf. These weren't just idle pastimes either. The pursuits also helped mold her statuesque athletic frame that eventually drove the common people wild. Leopold and Astrid's wedding might have been a romance come to life, but it caused a huge scandal. Before their church wedding in Belgium, they had a no-fuss civil ceremony at the Swedish royal palace. And that's not all. The man who officiated, Carl Lindhagen, was the first Don clergy member to ever marry a royal couple. And he was a known socialist. Let me tell you, it really pays to marry a prince. As a wedding present, the Belgian government gifted Princess Astrid with an exquisite tiara featuring 11 enormous diamonds. Astrid might have been a simple girl who knew how to get down and get her hands dirty, but she wasn't saying no to that. After her royal engagement, Astrid became a sensation. Wax figures of the Swedish beauty popped up in shops, and news footage of the future Queen of Belgians played at the cinema. People even started to write into publications for Astrid's famous endive salad recipe that had so successfully begged her a prince. Astrid went to finishing school, completing her high-born education, and while there, she studied the typical feminine accomplishments like piano, ballet, and childcare. The future Queen Consort of Belgium even volunteered at an orphanage in her spare time. Astrid and her family were so integral to Sweden's sense of identity that they even had a cake named after them. The Swedish princess cake is a layered confection topped with marzipan and named after Astrid and her siblings. Astrid's beautiful sisters did almost as well for themselves as a snow princess herself. Her eldest sister, Margareta, married Prince Axel of Denmark, while the middle sister, Martha, wed the Crown Prince of Norway. Sadly, Martha passed before she could make it to the throne. Of course, this was nothing compared to Astrid's faith. Astrid and her siblings often went shopping and accompanied for the latest trends on the streets of Stockholm. While some royal wives have found it hard getting accepted into the family, Astrid had no trouble. Elizabeth once said of the charming, sweet Astrid, "I might not have succeeded in finding for my son an ideal bride, but Leopold has done more. He has found for me an ideal daughter-in-law." Although she only lived for a brief time before her life was cut tragically short, Astrid earned herself some of the legendary nicknames. People called her the Snow Princess or the Snow Queen, and it even snowed on her wedding day to Leopold. Since the common people went wild over her, they also named her the Queen of Hearts. If there's one thing to know about Queen Astrid, is that she came from fiery Swedish stock. Mama Ingeborg was in particular one formidable woman. In protest of Germany during World War II, the Queen Dowager even once blocked off the palace window that faced the German embassy. As we've seen, beneath her serene surface, Astrid could be just as radical. In order to encourage Belgians to drink healthy beverages and lay off those famous lagers, Astrid helped set up Milk Week and even hired one of her staff to report on milk regulations around the world. Astrid and her siblings might have had some royal rivalries, but they stuck with each other when it really counted. In 1932, Princess Martha expressed her love towards Astrid with a heartwarming gesture. She named her newborn girl Astrid in honor of her aunt. But in a few short years, that touching act would turn utterly heartbreaking. Astrid wasn't just gorgeous. She was famous worldwide for her beauty. With her light hair, wide eyes, and sweet face, Astrid was the pretty one of her family, and when she came of age, one of the most eligible royals in Europe. In August 1935, Astrid and Leopold were on yet another incognito holiday. This time in Switzerland, they had brought their two eldest children along to their Swiss villa for most of the trip. But late in the month, they sent the two back to Belgium with their nannies to sneak some alone time together. Sadly, it couldn't have gone worse. The king and queen decided to take a mountain hike among the Swiss pear trees on August 29, 1935. As these were no-fuss monarchs, they even insisted that their chauffeur sit in the back seat on the way there, while Leopold drove and Astrid navigated. This was a fatal mistake. Sometime along their drive to the hiking path, Astrid, who was referring to her map, pointed at something outside of her window. It was an innocent enough gesture, but it had devastating consequences. Leopold, following her hand, likely took his eyes off the steep mountainous road for 1 second, and a mere second was all it took. In the next few moments, a horrific event occurred, and Leopold could never take it back or forgive himself for it. With the king at the wheel, the car tilted off the road and plummeted down a steep slope and quickly careened into a tree. The forest threw Leopold entirely out of the car, but when the chaos cleared, he realized his beloved wife had it much worse. Astrid was a stubborn fighter until the end, and as the car rattled down the mountain slope, she had tried to save herself by opening the door and rolling out. Tragically, that's not what happened. The vehicle was simply moving too fast and too violently, and the queen was also thrown from the car, her body slamming into another pear tree. Since the king and queen of Belgium had been traveling incognito and with very little retinue, there was no one around to provide immediate medical attention. Sadly, this is exactly what Astrid needed. Instead, she passed at the scene of the accident, just after 9:30 a.m. on that August morning. When the world heard the shocking news, it went into instant mourning. Throngs of people attended the Snow Queen's funeral, although none were able to believe something so horrific had happened to someone so good. Astrid now lies in her adopted home of Brussels, but it wasn't the last thing we heard of her. To this day, there are still macabre tokens of Astrid's final minutes near where she perished. The museum close to the site of her fatal accident keeps not only a shard from the windshield of her wrecked car, but also a log of the pear tree her body collided into. For those less into the Gothic vibes, mourners also build her a small chapel on the crash site as well, and it remains a popular pilgrimage destination for those who want to keep the Snow Queen's memory alive and well. Today, Astrid still lives on. No fewer than 2 of her grandchildren are reigning monarchs, King Philip of Belgium and Henry, Grand Duke of Luxembourg. She is also second cousins with the late Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip. Leopold was racked with grief and guilt after killing his beloved wife. In fact, he could barely stand to think of that fateful day, so he made a chilling request. Instead of ever recovering the vehicle he was driving, he ordered his men to sink the car into the depths of Lake Lucerne, near where the royal couple had fatally crashed. Thanks for watching History Exposé. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.